On May 8th, both Hall's team and Fisher's team departed Camp 2 and commenced the grinding ascent of the ropes up the Lot's face. 2,000 feet above the floor of the Western Coombe, just below Camp 3, a boulder the size of a small television came rocketing down from the cliffs above and smashed into Andy Harris's chest. It knocked him off his feet, slammed the wind out of him, and left him dangling from the fixed line in a state of shock for several minutes. Had he not been clipped in with a Jumar, he would have certainly fallen to his death. When he arrived at the tents, Andy looked badly rattled but claimed that he wasn't injured. "I might be a bit stiff in the morning," he insisted, "but I think the bloody thing didn't do much more than bruise me." Just before the rock nailed him, he'd been hunched forward with his head down. He happened to look up a moment before it struck, so that it merely grazed his chin before hitting him in the sternum, but it had come sickeningly close to smashing into his cranium. "If that rock had hit me in the head," Andy speculated with a grimace as he shed his pack, leaving the rest of the sentence unsaid. Because Camp 3 was the only camp on the entire mountain that we didn't share with the Sherpas. It meant that here we had to do our own cooking, which mostly amounted to melting prodigious quantities of ice for drinking water. Due to the pronounced dehydration that was an inevitable byproduct of heavy breathing in such desiccated air, each of us consumed more than a gallon of liquid every day. We therefore needed to produce approximately 12 gallons of water to meet the needs of 8 clients and 3 guides. As the first person to reach the tents on May 8th, I inherited the job of ice chopper. For 3 hours, as my companions trickled into camp and settled into their sleeping bags, I remained outside hacking at the slope with the adze of my ice axe, filling plastic garbage bags with frozen shards and distributing the ice to the tents for melting. At 24,000 feet, it was fatiguing work. Every time one of my teammates yelled, "Hey John, you still out there? We could use some more ice over here." It gave me a fresh perspective on how much the Sherpas ordinarily did for us, and how little we truly appreciated it. By late afternoon, as the sun eased toward the corrugated horizon and the temperature began to plunge, everyone had pulled into camp except Lou Koseshke, Frank Fishbeck, and Rob, who had volunteered to do the sweep and come up last. Around 4:30 p.m., guide Mike Groom received a call from Rob on his walkie-talkie. Lou and Frank were still a couple of 100 feet below the tents and moving extremely slowly. Would Mike please come down to assist them? Mike hurriedly put his crampons back on and disappeared down the fixed ropes without complaint. Nearly an hour passed before he reappeared, just ahead of the others. Lou, who was so tired he'd let Rob carry his pack, staggered into camp looking pale and distraught, muttering, I'm finished, completely out of gas." Frank showed up a few minutes later, appearing even more exhausted, although he'd refused to give his pack to Mike. It was a shock to see these guys, both of whom had been climbing well lately, in such a state. Frank's apparent deterioration came as a particular blow. I'd assumed from the beginning that if any members of our team reached the top, Frank, who'd been high on the mountain 3 times previously and seemed so savvy and strong, would be among them.